All right, guys, welcome back to 91 North, 95 South. We are here with another episode. It is Wednesday, August 10th. At the time we're recording this, it's Daniel Drainville and my illustrious co-host,
Max Meza.
Welcome back.
Howdy. Hello.
Oh, Max, we got a special episode in store for today.
Man, do we have a special one for you guys?
We are so excited.
Well, as they can tell from the title, also hello to any newcomers we might have.
Yeah, welcome.
Should we do hey, we're from Connecticut?
Oh yeah,
Maybe?
yeah. Let's do it, just in case.
It's probably gonna be some newcomers.
Yeah, just in case.
Welcome. Yeah. We're from Connecticut. Go Whalers.
Yeah, bring back the Whalers.
Back the Whalers. But yeah, I'm a New York sports fan. Dan's a Boston sports fan. So we just talk about all the sports. Turn my levels up a little bit. But yeah,
but not even just that. We try to bring in, every team, to a certain degree.
Yeah.
We're homers. We love our teams. But we also try to talk about...
But we also don't have crazy homer takes.
Yeah. Without further ado, we don't really have a... sometimes we like to have a, outline of what we like to go through in the show. But we're not doing that today. We're just... Because we don't have too much to talk about before we get to the special interview that we have coming up later. But we do have a couple things that we wanted to include in this episode as well. So... I'm going to get into... Do you want to go first, or you want me to...
Nope.
I'm offering it up, I figured it's a courtesy move.
Nah, I'm straight.
Okay. Well, we got some fun stuff to get into about the NBA. There's not too much going on right now.
No.
The off-season is really in full swing. But... For the past couple weeks, we've been ground through the Kevin Durant rumor mill, and that's still going on. This saga, I don't have an exact date of when it started, but it's certainly been going on, it seems like, for a month, maybe longer. And now we just got new reports coming out about Kevin Durant, that there was a meeting. I'm taking this from an article written by athletic reporter Shams Charania, that a meeting was held over the weekend between Kevin Durant and Nets owner Joe Tsai, during which he reiterated his request to be traded and told Tsai that he needs to choose between him and the pairing of general manager Sean Marks and coach Steve Nash. First off, what do you think about that? Like, giving an ultimatum to the Nets owner. Certainly an interesting move.
I think my stance from the beginning is there's been no point in this entire journey where the Nets have had to choose between anyone, like Kevin Durant or anything.
Right.
Because, I firmly believe that if you told Kevin, if Kevin Durant tried to sit out, like he physically would not be able to keep himself off a basketball court for more than 10 games. So my thing this whole time is just don't trade him, because there's no way he can sit out for a whole season. But yeah, that is just
well, it certainly would test his resolve.
I also don't know. It doesn't really seem like he's coming from a place of leverage either.
No, not at all.
He already established he wants to be traded. So now he's saying he'll stay if they fire the coach and the GM.
Yes.
So, my guy, you already wanted to leave.
Right. Now what do we know? We know that you didn't want to stay with us, first off. The only conceivable way that you're getting traded is in a large package deal. Yeah. Where you're going to another team who's likely giving up one of their stars, and then you're just going to be on another situation that's likely worse than the Brooklyn Nets. So what leverage do you really have in this situation?
Yeah, it's
It's
it's an interesting move
Yeah,
by
it's
KD.
it's really interesting. Durant also stated that he does not have faith in the team's direction, which, you know, I don't necessarily disagree with him, but I don't think that this team can have a direction right now when their future is so uncertain.
I mean, the Nets are pretty good.
Yeah,
Like if Kevin Durant stays,
yeah, absolutely.
like what's the problem with the direction they're on?
I understand like the direction that he's talking about. Maybe he's had some sort of falling out with the coach, who, mind you, was brought in.
He picked,
hand picked.
Well, did he pick him or Kyrie?
I'm not exactly
that's an
sure,
important distinction. Because
It
KD
is.
might have just been like, sure, whatever, and Kyrie picked Steve Nash, which I'm not really. I haven't done much reading on that.
Right. Yeah,
But
I would have to look a little bit closer at that, but man, it certainly seems like he was on board with having Steve Nash as the coach,
yeah,
like for the past few years, and then I'm wondering what soured that relationship, and if it's just getting blown out in the playoff series, like maybe a lack of feels like might be a lack of vision, a lack of discipline, and real coaching over the players on the team by Steve Nash.
right.
I don't know, but
Do you have Joe Tsai's tweet that he made after KD?
no, I don't.
Oh,
Do you have it?
no, he but a lot of people were saying like he came out in support of Steve Nash in the front office. Like he did in some ways, but also like left the door open to like make a move on firing or hiring or like keeping them on,
Okay, I found it. From August 8th. Our front office and coaching staff have my support. We will make decisions in the best interest of the Brooklyn Nets. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So door is definitely open to making a move on firing them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's an interesting point of whatever you would call it on this. That tweet definitely adds some fuel to this fire.
Yeah, it's wild. Go Knicks, baby.
We might be the only New York team left after this.
Good.
So I wanted to move on from just talking about the situation with the Brooklyn Nets and how it ties into my team, the Boston Celtics. And a tweet came out today from Adam Himmelsbach from the Boston Globe, who shared new rumbles suggesting how aggressively the Nets have been trying to trade Durant. Per Himmelsbach, Brooklyn initially tried to pry both Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown from Boston. And a deal with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown in it is absolute insanity.
Yeah. Well, it's just it doesn't really make sense for the Celtics to do that at all. Who's Kevin Durant going to play with? It's going to be KD and Malcolm Brogdon and Marcus Smart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very interesting trade proposal from the Brooklyn Nets there. The Globe reporter notes that was shot down by the Celtics, but Brooklyn later shifted its focus to a potential deal centered on Brown, Marcus Smart, and a massive haul of future first-round picks. Still, the Celtics were uninterested, according to Himmelsbach.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense because you don't want to, you're not going to walk into a negotiation wanting $100 and say, but willing to take 75 and be like, oh, I'll take 75. You start at like 150.
Mm-hmm. And that was a 150 offer.
Yeah, well, that was like a was like a 500 offer.
Yeah.
But yeah, nah, you have to make that like initial offer. But I don't know. If I'm the Celtics, KD and JT,
I mean,
that's deadly.
Of course, it's hard to, when you think about having those two next to each other, it's really hard,
Man.
not to like it. But man, I don't know. It's just like not even considering all the first round picks that would have to be in this deal, like giving up a younger player in Brown who I think is just now like entering his prime.
But if you give all this up, you could be winning a ring. You could be getting a ring.
They say that's the goal. Yeah.
So I don't really care about draft picks if I'm getting a banner.
Right. But there's also, there's a strong chance that you don't win a ring still because you still have the Milwaukee Bucks to contend with.
For sure.
You have the.
I don't have the Celtics coming out of the East right now, but
with Kevin Durant,
KD and JT,
would that change your mind? Would that?
Yes,
that would move the needle, right?
Obviously, dude. Yes, I'm instantly. I think. Well, you just look at the Nets and the Bucks series from 2 years ago. I mean, I would definitely argue, at least on paper, that this next season's Celtics would be better than that Nets team, at least in terms of depth players. And then you think about that series, and it was just KD. I mean, you had James Harden, the last, 2 games, essentially as a decoy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. You give that man JT, foot might still be on the line, but it might not matter. You might be blowing him out by that point.
I'm not disagreeing with you because clearly that is the case right now. Like Kevin Durant, as right now, is a huge upgrade over Jaylen Brown, and I don't think anyone can deny that.
Yeah, he's an upgrade over everybody.
Yeah. So and then you put him next to Malcolm Brogdon, Jason Tatum, Robert Williams, Al Horford, and all the depth pieces that the Celtics have now.
It's a good team.
And Marcus Smart, and yeah, that would be a solid contender for the finals. A solid favorite for the finals, likely. But man, I don't know. I don't see the deal getting done.
I don't either. But man, if I'm the Celtics, I'm taking that. If the Nets offered that, bruh, I'm taking that. And I'm saying thank you.
Maybe I'm just a homer. I don't know.
Nah, it's okay.
I love Jaylen Brown too much.
But is there anything else you want to say about that?
No, that's all I had about the Kevin Durant rumors.
So I just have one thing to mention about the Rangers. They named Jacob Trouba captain. We have a comment from Chris Drury. Quote, anyone that has been around our team for the last few seasons, I think certainly understands the impact Jacob has had on our group day to day, day in, day out, on ice, off ice, game days, or practice days. He's a terrific... He's a terrific... He's a terrific leader, and we think he'll be a great Rangers captain for years to come. So it's the, congrats, Jacob Trouba.
Congratulations.
He's the 28th captain. He's a 28-year-old. He's the 28th captain of franchise history. First one since Ryan McDonough was traded in 2018. There was an interesting quote from Trouba about how the Rangers leadership kind of works. I don't know if you remember, but last year they named 6 alternate captains instead of having a captain and the 2 alternates. Quote from Trouba: "We had a great a group of core leaders, and if anybody had an issue or wanted to talk, we would meet, call a meeting, and discuss it and figure out how you want to address it. That's going to have to continue going forward. I think all of our leadership group has different strengths, different qualities, different relationships with other players and people, and we use each other as well as we can to navigate through each situation, every situation. So I thought that was a really interesting. I don't know how many other NHL locker rooms work, but I just thought that was an interesting quote. I think that's a pretty cool dynamic to have in the locker room. It sounds like it's more open and people feel comfortable to talk. I mean, there's like 20, 25 players or something like that. So you got 6 guys you can come talk to about whatever. Like I think that's a great environment to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to relate it to my own experience too much, but it's sort of like having, I was a Boy Scout and having obviously aside from all the abuse scandals that happen in Boy Scouts, which I never dealt with myself, but having scoutmasters that you can come to, and there was multiple of them, and you could come, felt like you could come to any of them with a problem and you could trust them. So it's a cool dynamic to have in the locker room.
Yeah. No, that's I think it's great. I definitely was expecting Chris Kreider to get it. Just because he's the longest tenured.
Definitely
Ranger.
A little bit salty.
No, I'm not salty. If they're there every day and Troobs is the guy. He's the guy.
Troobs hold it down.
I mean, yeah, dude. I don't know if you remember watching games, but he's the guy that just lays the crazy hits on people.
How could I forget?
Yeah. So. Yeah, I guess the Rangers are really about that life, about that grit life.
Hey, it's good to see them doubling down on that.
Yeah, I'm not mad at it, dude. I'm really excited for the season. And yeah, we got a little hockey talk coming up with a special guest, Andrew Berkshire, talking about hockey culture and the issues surrounding it, some steps we can take. I think we covered a lot of different subjects in terms of the different areas of toxicity within hockey culture.
Absolutely, and there's so much to ground to try to cover, but I think we painted it with a broad brush, and we got into some really interesting conversations with him.
Yeah, no, it was a great talk. It was a great it wasn't really like a super fun conversation, obviously, but it was fun talking to him, talking to Andrew. Like we say, really appreciate having him on. Had a chance to meet him up in Montreal. At the Steve Dangle fan event. It was great. Just really appreciate having him on. And Dan, do you have anything else you want to say before we kick it to the pod or to the interview?
Just a super knowledgeable guy about the sport.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think you guys are really going to enjoy this. So without further ado, let's get into the interview.
Yep.
Everyone, we'd like to welcome you all back to 91 North, 95 South podcast. And today we have a very special episode coming up. To all our listeners, you have finally got to see us interview our first guest. We'd like to give a warm 91 North welcome to host of Game Over Montreal and manager of the Game Over brand at SDPN, Andrew Berkshire. Andrew, thank you so much. Sorry. Sorry to cut you off.
It's okay.
You want to start that over?
No,
Okay.
it's not a big deal.
That's how it works on over Zoom and stuff. It's
There is a little
the
bit.
nature of the world nowadays.
Absolutely. Yeah. Don't worry about it, dude.
Okay. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to try not to cut you off again. I'll do my best.
Can you tell that we got a little Canadian in us with the amount we apologize?
Yeah, it's very Canadian.
I actually got into a sorry off when we were in Montreal with a stranger in the street.
Really?
Yeah, it was great.
Oh yeah.
Did you get into a Canadian standoff? Did you drive?
No, we were walking. We were just walking. I kept bumping into this woman, and she was like, "No, I'm sorry, I'm bumping into you." And I was like, "No, I'm sorry."
Oh no, Canadian standoff is a 4-way stop, and everyone's going, "No, you go first."
Oh my
No, you
God,
go first.
No.
Yeah, we didn't get into one of those.
No, that's brutal.
Yeah, it's you don't want to get caught in one of those. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a 10-minute issue at least.
It can
Max
get pretty bad.
Did Max end up telling you that we were in Montreal actually a couple weeks before you?
No.
Yeah, we went there and we visited for the draft.
No, we went there weeks before. We saw him there.
Oh yeah, we did see you there at the
Yes.
SDPN. I'm so sorry, I completely forgot.
No worries.
At the SDPN meetup, yeah, and we were there at the same time.
Yeah, I recognize you.
I was actually looking at a couple of the pictures you had on your Facebook prior to this, and we made appearances. Yeah. So it's pretty cool.
All right.
Yeah, it was a fun event.
Sorry, I've taken up too much time just talking.
We got the timeline.
Yeah, reminiscing, you know.
Yeah. So Andrew, so why we've brought you here to the podcast today is to have a discussion on hockey culture. As a former writer for the Montreal Gazette, you've done your fair share of analysis of advanced analytics and have authored several articles there. You're also the current host of a show that's focused on the Montreal Canadiens Hockey Club. As someone who knows a great deal about hockey and about the NHL in general, what comes to mind when I say this term, hockey culture?
Oh man, nothing good. I'll say that. I think there's a lot of prevailing people in power want to pretend that hockey is this very great thing and that hockey players are the best athletes. And you know, I think a lot of that proceeds from the fact that most of them are white, and there's a lot of underlying racism in that kind of talk. Not to say that everybody who says that is racist, but they don't understand where it's coming from, why that perception exists. And, you know, thank goodness for Rick Westhead uncovering stuff, because
Absolutely.
if it weren't for one of him and a couple other people who are willing to actually dig into this sport and unearth the stories that everyone kind of knows about but doesn't really talk about, we'd be continuing on with this myth of hockey culture being this bastion of purity, and it just isn't. There's a lot going on right now. I think the Kyle Beach story out of Chicago that Rick Westhead helped blow wide open has opened the door for these kinds of stories to be told on a big stage. And it's about time, because, you know, we're not that far removed from Akim Aliu being a pariah in the NHL because he refused to be hazed. And days later, taking a two-hand stick from his team captain in practice, Steve Downey, you know, breaking his jaw, you know, putting him on the injured reserve. And somehow Aliu was being talked about as if he was the bad guy. You know, there's so many incidents like this that we just don't talk about, or we talk about in a way that, you know, lionizes the perpetrator. It's crazy. And that's before we even get into the sexual assault stuff that goes on. And I will say this, every single person who lives in a town with a junior team, they know a story. You know, maybe they don't know the facts, but they've heard rumors. This stuff is not uncommon.
Yeah, totally. That's insane. And that just speaks to, you know, how this is going on a small scale, as well as the stuff that we hear about, through Rick Westhead and through like Major League Hockey reporting. But there's so many, like you said, I'm sure there's so many instances of this happening in youth hockey, and that just never gets told for either fear of retaliation from the surrounding hockey community or what have you. It's a scary thought that this is happening with such regularity.
Also, I'd like to touch on something you kind of briefly mentioned about when a BIPOC player deals with these like terrible acts of racism. Like a great example would be Nazem Kadri in this past postseason, dealing with death threats and just terrible things on social media. And there's this thing, and I actually noticed a slight difference in how people talked about it this time versus other things, but there's definitely a sense, not only in hockey and sports in general, I think, when players deal with these things, that it's like, oh, he overcame this, and it's kind of glossed over, and it's more focused that the performance that the player had rather than like the racism.
Yeah. And we saw that a lot with Kadri this year. There was some pushback on it, which was like kind of new in a way, right. But there was definitely, and I'm partially guilty of that as well, because it is satisfying in a way to see a player like Kadri, come after that awful barrage of racism that he dealt with. And I believe he scored a hat trick the next game. So it's like him shoving it in the haters' faces, right? But focusing on that performance afterwards creates this like triumphant narrative when like it's not over.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not something that he should have had to triumph over, right? Like it isn't something that he should have to deal with. And that whole situation was crazy, right? Like Jordan Binnington has a history of racist things that he's said in the past that he's posted on Twitter that people were retweeting in the playoffs, and he finally deleted like 10 years later. But
wow, I didn't know they were still up. That's crazy.
Yeah, they were still up. It's crazy. Jeez. But even that situation where he threw the empty water bottle at Kadri, and you see a lot of people who would defend that kind of stuff, who are like, oh, it's an empty water bottle, it's not going to hurt him. But the thing is, it's not about hurting him, right? It's the complete lack of respect and decorum off the ice that probably would not have happened if Nazem Kadri was a white player, even if he injured Jordan Binnington, even if it was on purpose, which I don't believe it was at all in Nazem Kadri's case. It just doesn't make any sense from looking at the replay. But I just don't see that happening in a normal situation, right? Where it's two white players in hockey. It's never really happened. It's the same as like a few years ago in the playoffs when the Boston Bruins and Montreal Canadiens were playing. This is back in like, I think 2014. And Sean Thornton from the bench during play sprayed PK Subban in the face with a water bottle. Mm-hmm. And I believe he got fined for it. He might have even got a 1-game suspension. But during play, like imagine if he's going for a puck and somebody's coming to hit him and he's blinded by water in the face, right? You could really get injured. Seems like nothing if you just say, oh, he sprayed him with water in the face, but it's during play. You're on skates, and that kind of stuff. It always seems to be a BIPOC player who's on the other end of those incidents. And yet every time a player of those descriptions has something happen leading up to the NHL, they're also seen as the problem, right? How often do you see young players described as personality issues or locker room issues, or you see like Anthony Duclair being told by John Tortorella, who I'm not saying is racist, but being told by John Tortorella that he doesn't know how to play hockey as an NHL player, as a former like 30 goal scorer at that point. And then right after he leaves the Blue Jackets, what happens? Anthony Duclair is like a consistent 25, 30 goal scorer the next 3 years. Why are we in a situation still where all these players have to quote unquote triumph over that kind of adversity just to be accepted. It's crazy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if given what we know about these specific instances of what we want to address as racism in the NHL, certainly what some people might be willing to cover their eyes and look the other way about. But given what we know about these cases, why do you think it is that when just last year the NHL is asked to be involved in the Tape Out Hate campaign with the Hockey Diversity Alliance, which has been founded by several, African American players in the NHL, and they wouldn't even let them use the jerseys in their Budweiser advertisement? Why is the NHL going to look the other way on something that it could have so easily stepped in on and said, hey, at least like we know we have a problem with this and we're trying to address it? That doesn't show me that at all.
Yeah. Yeah. The NHL is its own worst enemy in a lot of ways. It's also essentially a giant conglomerate corporation between all 32 teams, and everything moves slowly. And it seems like both Gary Bettman and Bill Daly don't like being told what to do or what's best. And I mean, look, they're still dragging their feet on concussions. Bill Daly released a statement the other day basically saying that they don't believe that concussions are caused by hockey, which is crazy. Like, we know they are. Yeah. It's very obvious. We've already gone through this litigation with football. So I'm sure that the guys skating at each other at 38 miles an hour can cause concussions, but they can never really get out of their own way, right? I think the NHL is a very conservative institution in both philosophy and business philosophy. Even things as simple as like, should we really be playing 82 games a season, or could we find something more fun than that? Right? Like, you remember the 56 game season 2 seasons ago now, like that, it was so much smoother. Right. I feel like if we were to do that and then roll in like a tournament in the middle of the season, something closer to what European football does, like you look at that kind of stuff and there's just no interest, no appetite to do things differently. And it's the same with social stuff. They want to look like they are, but I don't think there's any actual appetite from the highest ranking people in the league to make a significant change. Because in order to make that change, you then also have to recognize that the line that you've been selling for the last however many years just isn't true. The hockey is for everyone campaign is garbage. It doesn't actually do anything for change. The whole idea of hockey players being the best athletes, which they always talk about, like in terms of like morals and stuff like that, obviously not true. There's a long history of, we'll say, questionable to illegal behavior from NHL players and hockey players all the way down the line that they just don't want to acknowledge. It's the same thing as the concussion stuff. They will not face it until they are forced to face it.
Man. And it's interesting you mentioned them not wanting to act on any of these like questionable or illegal acts by players. And I mean, from a relative outsider perspective, it seems that the reason they don't want to do that is because whether it be the NHL head office or teams at an organizational level, whatever, it doesn't seem that they view these things as bad or wrong acts at all.
Yeah, I think moreover, they view it as they're like looking from the perspective of what they could lose rather than what's the right thing.
Gotcha.
Right. It's the same thing in a lot of sexual assaults involving, like college age men or rich white men, for example. Like, you often see it framed as, like, should we ruin this person's life for one mistake, right? When obviously it's not a mistake. It was a conscious choice to do these things. And it's the same thing with hockey players. Like, oh, should we wreck their career over one thing when like it's the one thing they've been caught, right? Or the one person who's willing to come forward without acknowledging the victim in all this, right? And their life has been irreparably changed, maybe ruined, So until they can get to that point, like they're never going to change.
And not to, sorry to interrupt, but irreparably changed. And they had absolutely no say in that.
Yep.
That is something that they
100%.
had, unlike the players. So that is definitely something to consider when you're doling out punishments for these sorts of things.
Absolutely. Consent is the name of the game today, right? And I think that there's so much pushback from the older generation and people who have traditional values or conservative values. Is it really that much to ask to be considerate of other people? It's this weird disconnect where it seems like the biggest ask in the world is to not say certain words or not do things that are awful. Whereas like it's very minor behavioral changes that people are asking for.
Right.
It's wild that this is even an argument that we're having to deal with today in 2022. But and hockey is not the only place where this exists, but hockey culture is definitely an area where they refuse to believe that this is a problem. And every single day we get more and more evidence that this is a major problem, especially sexual assault and racism.
Right. Yeah, no, that's definitely a great point to make because we definitely do focus on the problems of hockey culture, but these problems are not only in hockey, they're in sports across the board and in society at large.
It's kind of endemic of like locker room culture in general, but it's just Andrew, is it wrong to say that we just see it's almost like an enhanced version of locker room culture in the NHL, the boys club, it's like that to like the 10th degree. Sorry, did you have something to say about that?
Yeah, it's that whole like that old adage of like boys will be boys taken to the extreme, right? Where it's like multiplied upon itself for decades and people get away with everything. And I think whenever there's a revenue stream behind it as well, where there's cash to be made, especially like if a small town has a player that's going to make the NHL, that player knows they can get away with everything. And anybody who grew up around hockey knows how hockey players behave in Canada, especially because they're the thing, right? They're the hot shots. They can get away with things. They know they can get away with things. Everybody knows that they can get away with things. If they do something wrong, it gets hushed, especially if they're on track to make the NHL. Every little town wants their guy to make the NHL. Everyone gets behind them and they have to build this narrative for themselves. Oh, he's the best guy, right? Oftentimes not true. It's just the way it goes. That old adage of, absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's obviously not like political power or anything like that, but having no consequences for your actions for your entire life and essentially never really growing up past being a middle schooler to high schooler in terms of like your emotional maturity and your ability to deal with people. There's going to be issues like this. I'm not absolving them, but this is just the culture that we've created as a sporting society. And then you have this entire structure of youth sports, especially competitive youth sports, that's been, cultivated in a lot, like almost every sport. There's sexual predators in there, right? Whether it's hockey with Graham James or the constant revelations in gymnastics, which are horrifying to read about. But like, we really need to take all of sport and examine it deeply. Look at who are these people who are involved in coaching, who are the athletic therapists. Everybody needs to be examined because not only are they creating more victims, but they're contributing to that culture of silence, right? Because if there's somebody else who's in that who it has those predilections or whatever, and they see that somebody else has gotten away with it, they're gonna feel like they can get away with it. It's just it's toxic how much of it there is and how little we actually talk about it. It's changing. It is changing. And I do believe that like Katie Strang and Rick Westhead and a few others are going to create or have already created a shockwave in minor hockey culture. I would like to see the NHL recognize their role here and do their part to help. I just don't believe we'll actually see it for a very long time.
Yeah, those are great points. And actually, I would really like to touch on the youth aspect of hockey because, through our research leading up to this, we've been discussing, things that we think could help fix the culture, and we came to the conclusion that it's really tough to put things at the NHL level, like consent training, whatever, and expect that these 18, 19-year-old kids who this toxic culture has been ingrained in them for that entire span to just, go to an 8-hour class one day and have that switch flip.
Yep.
So while obviously we do believe that the NHL should have things in place to continue that training, and that learning and training really never stops, like even in a regular person's life. But do you think there are things that could be done at a youth level to maybe clean up the game or try to fix these attitudes?
Yes, 100%. And I think you're you're definitely right in terms of the NHL in a lot of instances is going to be too late. I think for like rookies, there should probably be like a mandatory program that every rookie has to do in the NHL to kind of like get them up to speed in case they've missed things along the way. But you have to start earlier if you can, junior hockey, even earlier minor hockey, continue that education all the way down, talk about consent. I think hockey, especially in Canada, has a unique power structure similar to like football in the United States, where like, obviously girls for men's hockey are going to be attracted to you. You are the thing that you're the equivalent of the American football captain, right? Like the quarterback of the team. You have to understand that there's a power structure at play, and that even if you may not be conscious of it, you can take advantage of it. So I think that has to start very young. Probably around the same time as sex education starts in school, which also needs to be probably a little bit younger, but regardless, like get that going. But as far as like, 18, 19-year-old players being too late, I'll tell you guys, like when I grew up in Northern Alberta through my teenage years, from when I was 11 and before that, Southern Saskatchewan. And I grew up in a household that was casually racist, it wasn't really until going to Montreal in like when I was 18 that I started to learn more about the world and informed my viewpoint. So like it can happen, but those players also have to be emotionally mature enough to take those lessons. Right. And that's also a problem, is that these guys, because they're handed everything and never faced consequences for anything, often are not emotionally mature, even into their 30s. Like you see a lot of guys who will retire from the NHL and they'll talk about like how they feel and stuff. And they're basically a high schooler, right? They haven't learned beyond that. They haven't educated themselves. Not all of them, there's super smart guys in the NHL, like Jason Spezza, who like took college courses and stuff like that during his career. There's lots of guys like that too, but a lot of the guys coming out of Canadian Major Junior operate like high schoolers until they're done in the NHL. It's just that same high school locker room that they were in junior the whole way through. And there's got to be a way for that to be broken.
Mm-hmm. Well said. And, it's pretty admirable of you to recognize, and relate this to your own experience that you had growing up in your household. Saying that you can change. Listen, no one is set in this, crystallized intelligence type of mindset where we have to be like stuck in our ways since high school. It's just so ingrained in players from that early age that it's tough to break them out of, but I think, like you said, not impossible. So yeah, thank you for that.
My pleasure.
I did want to bring up going back to something earlier that you said, how the power structure in Canada when it comes to hockey is different and more like a football in America sort of style. But I pulled up this in my research. I pulled up this study that was completed by the Angus Reid Institute. Now, the Angus Reid Institute is a national, not-for-profit, nonpartisan public opinion research foundation established to enhance and encourage better understanding of issues and trends affecting economic, social, governance, philanthropy, public administration, domestic, and foreign policy in Canada and its world. And so in 2021, this institute released the results of a public opinion survey that revealed that a majority of those closest to the game, be they players, coaches, friends, or family members of participants in hockey at multiple levels, said that hockey at the amateur and recreational level, has a culture problem. They came out and they recognized that. Also in that study was a statistic. This was a poll asked to all participants, open to all participants in the study, which I think was around 1,601 participants that they had. Given it's a small sample size, you can't draw like you shouldn't be basing your entire argument on this. But just something that speaks to that power structure is like they asked participants if hockey is part of a Canadian identity, and almost 53% said they strongly agreed, 40% said that they agreed, and only 4%, which equals out to, once you add in strongly disagree and not sure, that's only 7% that does not think that hockey is actually ingrained in the Canadian identity. So when you talk about power structure, that is something to consider when you're talking about something like that.
100%.
How do we think about our hockey players? How do we think about the sport itself?
Right. And then it becomes like a case of, especially for people who lean conservative, right? A case of like national pride, right? When you're attacking hockey, you're attacking Canada. And it's true. Hockey is 100% ingrained in national identity for Canadians. It is a huge part of, even people who don't like hockey understand that hockey is like Canada's sport, right? It's something that allows people to get together. It's an avenue that a lot of immigrants take to put their kids in hockey to help them belong, right? It's a way for them to ingratiate themselves into the country itself. And, obviously those people often face racism in minor hockey, which is a whole other thing, but it's another barrier to changing things, right? Because people are very resistant to push back against something they identify as part of themselves. But I think one of the most important lessons you can learn in life is that if you love something, you should want it to be better. So if you love your country, you should want it to be better. If you love your sport, you should want it to be better. And criticism does not equal hate, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I cover hockey for a living. I don't do that because I hate it. I love hockey. I've loved hockey since I was like 4 years old. It's one of the things that I enjoy most in this life, but I would like it to catch up with the rest of the world a little bit. And I don't think it's that big of an ask. It's just a big task. And Unfortunately, it seems like there's a lot of people who will want to drag their feet on these things. But as you mentioned in the poll, over half of people recognize there is a problem. That's a good start. It's a really good start. I think that we're on the path now to get somewhere. It'll just be seeing how quickly we can do it and how bumpy that road is going to be. And a lot of it is going to be painful because this stuff coming out from the 2018 World Junior team and then the 2003 World Junior team, it's not going to be the last. We're going to see a lot of stuff come out over the next few years that's going to be painful to read, painful to face, but we have to do it. And we can't shy away from it. And there's going to be people who, after a few cases of these things, are going to start tuning it out because they don't want to hear about it anymore. They just want to check out and enjoy their sports. But for a lot of people, we're just going to have to keep talking about it, keep pushing it, making sure that it's out there front and center so that we can keep moving in the right direction. It's unfortunate that we have to go about talking about bad news a lot, but it's the only way to force the league and the sport in itself to get better.
Well said. And I think that is a great point to leave off on, but if you have time for one more question,
sure.
I have one more. Do you think there is a dissonance between hockey fans and the organizations, whether at minor or in the NHL? Because it seems as though the fans of the NHL they're kind of waking up to these issues. And while I think a decent amount of hockey fans are still wanting to drag their feet, it seems like there is a difference in attitude.
Yeah, I think it comes down to what do you have to lose, right? If you're a fan, maybe you discover something about a player that was your favorite and it really sucks and they're no longer your favorite. But if you're a team and you discover something about a player, well, maybe that player's gone off of your team because they're going to jail. So they have financial incentives to not care nearly as much as fans do. Whereas we have the ability to kind of turn around and immediately look at what we believed and X that out. And this is the new evidence, we can go forward. I think teams, it's like the difference between a jet ski and a cruise liner, right? If you're trying to turn, jet ski can turn around real quick. Cruise liner needs to take a few kilometers. So I think that's the biggest difference there. Some teams are better than others in terms of being ahead of the game. I think 100%. The Toronto Maple Leafs are one they're very progressive. Other teams, not so much. But I mean, part of that also comes from hockey culture in itself, right? A lot of these teams are led by former players. You talk about a disconnect between fans and teams. Well, like how many teams have partnerships with Barstool, who has made their entire company philosophy to be harassment of women?
Right.
You know, every study that you see nowadays that says like what percentage of fans are women, the lowest I've ever seen for the NHL, I think is like 35%. You're really going to ignore 35% of your fan base or risk, pissing off or offending 35% of your fan base for one dumb company. Wow. It doesn't make any sense. Right. But there's that disconnect. I think teams have a lot of work to do with catching up. You even see stuff like the advertisement the NHL did a couple of years ago. It was like, not a soap opera, it's just hockey. And a lot of it was kind of like targeted against women, right? Like this is a man's sport, but a lot of women like this sport too. And we have to also look at what they enjoy. And that could be just the sport. It could be other kinds of coverage. We're behind. We got to get with it.
Man.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well said on everything, Andrew. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And thank you for your time.
Yeah, same for me. We would love to. I had so many more questions prepared. I could have done this thing for 2 hours, but I appreciate you giving us what little time you have. You are I'm sure a busy man, and thank you so much for doing this. Yeah.
My pleasure, guys. You have a good day.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Bonsoir, Montréal. 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 Bonsoir, Montréal.